42-year-old widowed intensive care nurse Elena Rodriguez was facing eviction from her Seattle apartment while drowning in $394,000 of bankruptcy-inducing medical debt from her husband Miguel's 18-month battle with brain cancer when desperate family members and financial advisors begged her to avoid the completely isolated two-bedroom cabin in the Cascade Mountains of Washington that came with $89,000 in overdue property taxes, no running water or electricity, and structural damage that engineering reports estimated would cost $267,000 to repair. But she had no idea that investigating the strange locked metal door hidden beneath the cabin's rotting floorboards would reveal a temperature-controlled underground vault containing 847 classified CIA documents from Operation Mockingbird and foreign intelligence files that had been missing since 1987, transforming a desperate healthcare worker facing homelessness into the recipient of a $8.4 million government whistleblower reward and exclusive consulting contracts with 3 congressional intelligence oversight committees. Before we dive into this incredible journey of hidden government secrets, drop a comment telling us what you think you'd do if you found classified CIA files, and if this story gives you chills, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow I've got an even more shocking government cover-up story that will blow your mind. At 42 years, old Elena Rodriguez was staring at her 6th eviction notice in 4 months. Surrounded by medical collection demands totaling $394,000 from her late husband Miguel's brain tumor treatment that had consumed their entire life savings, 401k retirement funds, and home equity during his desperate fight for survival at Seattle's Swedish Medical Center. The medical debt avalanche that had buried Elena included accumulated interest and penalties that had grown from $287,000 in original treatment costs to nearly $400,000 in total obligations that collection agencies pursued through daily harassment. Calls, threatening legal letters, and wage garnishment proceedings that had already seized 43% of her nursing salary from Harborview Medical Center. The crushing mathematical reality that kept Elena awake every night in her studio apartment in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood was that her combined monthly income of $5,200 from working 60-hour weeks as a registered nurse in the trauma intensive care unit, plus weekend shifts at urgent care clinics paying $52 per hour, could no longer cover even her most basic survival expenses in Seattle's increasingly unaffordable housing market. The rent on her 480-square-foot studio apartment had increased from $1,800 monthly to $2,900 after her lease renewal in March 2024, while her minimum debt payments consumed an additional $2,400 monthly, leaving her with negative $100 each month. Before accounting for food, transportation, utilities, or any other survival necessities. The morning of August 23, 2024, had begun like every other overwhelming day in Elena's increasingly desperate existence, with the 4:45 a.m. alarm that allowed her to complete medical billing appeals, insurance dispute calls, and debt negotiation attempts before leaving for her 12-hour hospital shift at 6:30 a.m. The nursing schedule that controlled Elena's every waking moment included mandatory overtime during summer staff shortages that often extended her workday to 16 hours, electronic health record documentation that required an additional 90 minutes of unpaid time after each shift, and continuing education requirements that cost $1,800 annually, while requiring weekend hours she desperately needed for extra income to address her mounting financial obligations. The medical debt crisis that had destroyed Elena's financial stability had begun in November 2022, when Miguel's persistent headaches and vision problems led to emergency room visits costing $18,000 before insurance coverage, followed by MRI scans. that revealed a stage 4 glioblastoma brain tumor requiring immediate neurosurgery at specialized oncology centers where their Primera Blue Cross insurance provided only 68% reimbursement for experimental procedures that represented Miguel's only hope for meaningful life extension. The brain cancer treatment protocol that Miguel's neuro-oncologist at Swedish Medical Center recommended included surgical tumor removal costing $89,000, weekly chemotherapy infusions at $6,800 each, targeted radiation therapy totaling $72,000, and experimental immunotherapy treatments that added $134,000 to their catastrophic medical expenses. The insurance coverage battles that Elena had fought throughout Miguel's 20-month illness included pre-authorization denials for cutting-edge immunotherapy protocols that his doctors considered essential for his specific tumor genetics, out-of-network. Penalties when the only available neuro-oncologists specializing in glioblastoma weren't covered under their plan, and treatment delay tactics that postponed critical procedures for weeks while Miguel's rapidly growing tumor compressed vital brain structures. The insurance limitations that affected Miguel's survival chances included annual caps on experimental treatments that forced therapy interruptions, restrictions on extended hospital stays that required premature discharge when Miguel experienced severe treatment complications, and exclusions for integrative cancer support services that were crucial for managing his cognitive decline and seizure activity during his final year of aggressive treatment. The specific medications that Miguel required for his brain cancer battle included temozolomide chemotherapy costing $8,400 per monthly cycle, Avastin infusions at $12,000 per treatment, anti-seizure medications like Keppra that insurance classified as non-preferred despite being essential for preventing life-threatening seizures, and steroid treatments for brain swelling that cost $890 monthly while causing severe side effects that required additional medications for management. The pharmaceutical expenses that accumulated during Miguel's treatment exceeded $278,000 for prescriptions alone, with insurance covering approximately 52% of costs, while leaving Elena responsible for co-payments that consumed their emergency savings faster than Miguel's tumor progressed despite aggressive intervention. The home healthcare expenses that became necessary during Miguel's final 8 months included skilled nursing services costing $67 per hour when Elena couldn't provide care due to her work obligations, specialized medical equipment including hospital beds and seizure monitoring devices that cost $1,240 monthly to lease, and occupational therapy services at $180 per session to help Miguel maintain basic cognitive and motor functions as his tumor affected critical brain regions. The caregiving coordination that Elena managed while working mandatory overtime included scheduling multiple specialists, coordinating experimental treatment protocols, and ensuring Miguel received proper neurological monitoring during the 12-hour shifts that Elena needed to maintain their health insurance coverage and generate income for ongoing treatment expenses. The bankruptcy consultation that Elena had pursued through Northwest Justice Project revealed that medical debt related to deceased spouses' experimental cancer treatment created complex legal challenges that prevented simple discharge through Chapter 7 proceedings, especially when the medical providers maintained that ongoing payments were required under personal guarantees that Elena had signed during Miguel's treatment crisis when informed consent was obtained while she was under extreme emotional duress. The bankruptcy attorney, Jennifer Kim, had explained that their Capitol Hill apartment lease and Elena's nursing license could be affected by bankruptcy proceedings, while remaining debt balances would likely survive discharge due to the personal guarantee complications and the timing of Miguel's death relative to when various treatments were authorized and billed. The eviction proceedings that had been initiated by her landlord on August 15, 2024, demanded immediate payment of $8,700 in missed rent plus $1,200 in late fees and legal costs, or vacating the premises within 10 days to prevent sheriff-enforced removal that would create a permanent eviction record, affecting Elena's ability to secure future rental housing in King County. The eviction timeline that the property management company had established would result in Elena's homelessness by September 1, 2024, unless she could generate money that her nursing salary and available credit couldn't provide through any conventional emergency assistance programs that had waiting lists exceeding 4 months for qualification review. The employment complications that had developed during Miguel's illness included 23 missed shifts due to medical emergencies and treatment appointments during his neurological decline, reduced overtime opportunities when Elena needed to provide cognitive care during Miguel's chemotherapy recovery periods that lasted 5 to 7 days after each infusion, and performance documentation issues when grief and caregiver exhaustion affected Elena's clinical judgment during the months following Miguel's death on July 4, 2024. The hospital administration at Harborview Medical Center had initially provided Family Medical Leave Act protection and schedule accommodations, but their support had diminished as Elena's emotional struggles affected her patient care ratings and clinical documentation quality that determined eligibility for shift differentials and specialty unit assignments that provided higher hourly wages. The grief counseling expenses that Elena had pursued to address her emotional trauma included twice-weekly therapy sessions at $220 per visit that insurance covered only partially, prescription antidepressants costing $340 monthly after insurance, co-payments, and bereavement support group participation that required transportation costs and time away from income-generating activities during Seattle's notoriously difficult winter months. The mental health treatment that Elena needed for processing Miguel's death while managing overwhelming financial pressure was becoming financially impossible as her debt obligations consumed increasing percentages of her income, while her emotional capacity for working extra shifts decreased due to complicated grief and anxiety symptoms that affected her clinical performance in the high-stress trauma unit environment. The credit score destruction that had resulted from missed payments during Miguel's final months had reduced Elena's FICO score from 789 to 312, eliminating her access to conventional loans, credit cards with reasonable interest rates, and rental housing in neighborhoods where she could afford to live on her nursing salary alone. The credit damage had created cascading problems, including utility security deposits of $1,200 per service when she needed to establish new accounts, higher insurance premiums that increased monthly expenses by $340 for auto and health coverage, and employment complications for nursing positions that required credit checks and eliminated opportunities at private hospitals and specialty clinics that paid significantly higher wages than Harborview Medical Center. The vehicle maintenance crisis that had emerged during Elena's financial deterioration included necessary repairs to her 2018 Honda Accord that required $4,200 for transmission work, brake system replacement, and engine maintenance that couldn't be postponed without creating safety hazards during her daily 28-mile commute through Seattle traffic to the hospital. The automotive expenses that Elena couldn't afford had forced her to use her remaining credit card limits for emergency repairs, while the car's declining reliability created additional stress about potential breakdown that could cost her job. if she couldn't maintain reliable transportation to work during Seattle's rainy season that made public transportation unreliable for healthcare workers with mandatory shift schedules. The family support system breakdown that had occurred during Miguel's illness included the loss of extended family assistance when relatives became overwhelmed by the duration and intensity of his medical crisis, financial limitations that prevented Elena's siblings from providing monetary support during their own economic struggles with mortgage payments and college-age children, and interpersonal conflicts that developed when family members questioned the expensive experimental treatments that consumed their savings without significantly extending Miguel's life or improving his quality of life during his final months. Elena's older sister Carmen, who lived in Portland, had stopped visiting after conflicts about treatment decisions, while her younger brother Roberto in Tacoma had offered emotional support but couldn't provide financial assistance due to his own family's needs and recent job loss in the aerospace industry. The social isolation that characterized Elena's current situation included the loss of couple friendships that had been central to their social life for over 15 years, financial inability to participate in activities with nursing colleagues who could afford entertainment and travel, and emotional exhaustion that made maintaining relationships difficult during the grief recovery period that followed Miguel's death. The support networks that had previously provided emotional strength through church activities, neighborhood associations, and professional organizations had become strained by Elena's financial crisis and the practical limitations of surviving on a single income while managing overwhelming debt obligations that required constant attention and stress management. The continuing education requirements that Elena's nursing license demanded included annual certification fees of $890 for maintaining her RN license, mandatory training courses that cost $1,600 yearly for trauma care specialization, and conference attendance that required travel expenses and time off work that she couldn't afford while struggling to maintain basic survival expenses. The professional development obligations that could affect Elena's employment eligibility were becoming impossible to maintain during her financial crisis, potentially threatening her nursing career and the specialized trauma care experience that represented her only hope for eventual debt repayment through higher-paying positions at private hospitals or specialty clinics. The retirement account devastation that had occurred during Miguel's treatment included complete liquidation of Elena's 403b savings that had contained $156,000 in accumulated retirement funds from 18 years of nursing career, early withdrawal, penalties that consumed $39,000 of the available money due to hardship withdrawal rules, and tax obligations that would generate additional debt when filing their final joint tax return for 2024. The retirement security that Elena had built through nearly 2 decades of careful saving and employer matching contributions had been completely eliminated, leaving her with no financial safety net and no prospect for future retirement that wouldn't require continued employment until she became physically unable to work in the demanding hospital environment. The utility disconnection crisis that had been escalating throughout the summer included electricity service termination warnings from Seattle City Light due to $1,890 in unpaid bills, natural gas disconnection notices that threatened heating service during Washington's approaching winter, and water service suspension warnings that would eliminate basic sanitation capabilities. The utility expenses that Elena couldn't afford had forced her to choose between maintaining essential services and making minimum debt payments, while her nursing salary was garnished by collection agencies that had obtained court orders for debt recovery. The prescription medication expenses that Elena required for managing hypertension and anxiety that had developed during Miguel's caregiving stress included monthly costs of $280 for medications that insurance covered only partially, therapy, co-payments for managing complicated grief that cost $440 monthly, and regular physician visits for stress-related health monitoring that cost $190 per appointment after insurance co-payments. The healthcare expenses that Elena needed for maintaining her own health while working demanding hospital shifts were becoming impossible to afford while servicing overwhelming debt obligations that consumed 71% of her gross income. The legal complications that surrounded Miguel's medical debt included personal guarantees that Elena had signed for experimental treatments during crisis periods when Miguel's condition was deteriorating rapidly, medical equipment financing, agreements that remained active after Miguel's death and required continued payments for devices that were no longer needed, and collection agency lawsuits that demanded immediate payment of balances that exceeded Elena's annual income while threatening garnishment of wages and bank accounts. The legal expenses that were accumulating through debt collection proceedings included attorney fees that collection agencies added to original balances, court costs that Elena was liable for when unable to attend hearings due to work obligations, and garnishment orders that reduced her take-home pay by amounts that made survival mathematically impossible. The food insecurity that had developed during Elena's financial crisis included reliance on hospital cafeteria meals during work shifts, elimination of grocery shopping except for basic necessities, and occasional use of food pantries that served healthcare workers facing financial emergencies. The nutritional challenges that accompanied Elena's financial stress included irregular eating patterns due to work schedule demands, limited access to fresh foods due to transportation and financial constraints, and the physical exhaustion that made meal preparation difficult after 16-hour hospital shifts that left her emotionally and physically depleted. The housing maintenance problems that Elena couldn't address included a persistent water leak in her studio apartment that her landlord refused to repair without current rent payment, electrical issues that created safety hazards but required professional repairs she couldn't afford, and mold problems that were affecting her respiratory health but required remediation that exceeded her available resources. The apartment conditions that were deteriorating due to deferred maintenance were creating health hazards that could affect Elena's ability to work in the sterile hospital environment, while her landlord used maintenance issues as additional justification for eviction proceedings. The transportation complications that threatened Elena's employment included expired vehicle registration due to inability to pay renewal fees, car insurance cancellation that had occurred when automatic payments failed due to insufficient funds, and mechanical problems that required immediate attention to prevent complete vehicle failure that would eliminate her ability to commute to work. The transportation crisis had reached critical levels when Elena's car failed emissions testing due to engine problems that would cost $3,800 to repair, while driving without valid registration and insurance created legal risks that could result in criminal charges and vehicle impoundment. The insurance premium increases that had occurred when Elena's coverage changed from spousal coverage under Miguel's employer plan to individual coverage through her hospital employment included higher deductibles that increased from $1,900 annually to $4,500, reduced prescription coverage that increased her medication costs by 48%, and elimination of mental health benefits that Miguel's plan had provided. The healthcare coverage changes that accompanied Elena's transition to widowhood had increased her annual medical expenses by approximately $3,200, while reducing the quality of coverage during a period when stress-related health problems required increased medical attention and prescription management. The bank account problems that had developed when Elena's checking account was overdrawn for 8 consecutive months included automatic closure by Chase Bank due to excessive overdraft fees and negative account balances that totaled $2,800 in accumulated penalties. The bank account closure had eliminated Elena's ability to receive direct deposit payments from Harborview Medical Center, cash payroll checks without expensive check cashing fees that consumed 6% of her gross income, and maintain automatic payments for essential services, including insurance and utilities that required electronic banking for discounted rates and payment processing. The check cashing services that Elena was forced to use charged fees ranging from $12 to $26 per paycheck, consuming approximately $140 monthly from her limited income, while providing no banking services that could help her rebuild financial stability or establish emergency savings for future crises. The financial isolation that resulted from losing traditional banking access had forced Elena to conduct all financial transactions through cash or money orders that charged additional fees, while providing no fraud protection or transaction records that would help her track expenses and manage her complex medical billing and debt payment obligations. The Christmas holidays that had passed just 2 months after Miguel's death had been particularly devastating for Elena's emotional and financial stability, as the anniversary of his death on July 4th coincided with increased expenses for medical equipment returns, final treatment reconciliations, and the emotional trauma of spending their first holiday season alone after 19 years of marriage. The seasonal depression that affected Elena during Seattle's notoriously dark winter months was compounded by financial stress and grief that made her job performance suffer, while her debt obligations continued accumulating interest and penalties that increased her total debt burden by approximately $1,800 monthly. The workplace social pressure that Elena experienced included well-intentioned advice from nursing colleagues who had experience with financial planning and unanimously recommended immediate bankruptcy filing, pastoral counseling from the hospital chaplain who emphasized debt forgiveness and starting fresh, and administrative pressure from nursing supervisors who were concerned about Elena's emotional stability affecting patient care quality in the high-acuity trauma unit, where clinical judgment errors could have life-threatening consequences for critically injured patients. The dating and relationship impossibility that characterized Elena's current situation included the practical inability to maintain social relationships when every conversation involved financial stress, emotional unavailability during grief, recovery that made romantic relationships inappropriate and unrealistic, and the social stigma associated with massive debt and pending eviction that eliminated her attractiveness as a potential partner for anyone seeking financial stability or shared economic goals. The isolation that resulted from financial crisis had effectively eliminated Elena's social life beyond work obligations and essential survival activities. The professional reputation concerns that had emerged during Elena's crisis included documentation of performance issues related to grief and financial stress, concerns from colleagues about her emotional stability during patient care situations, and potential implications for future employment if her financial problems became known to hospital administration or nursing supervisors. The career implications of her financial crisis included reduced opportunities for advancement, elimination of specialty unit assignments that required stable personal circumstances, and potential disciplinary action if her personal problems continued affecting her clinical performance in the demanding trauma care environment. The seasonal challenges that Elena faced during Seattle's upcoming winter included increased heating costs that she couldn't afford, seasonal affective disorder symptoms that would require light therapy, and increased mental health treatment she couldn't pay for, and transportation difficulties during ice and snow conditions that could make her vehicle commute dangerous or impossible without winter tire upgrades that cost $890 for her Honda Accord. The winter preparation expenses that Elena couldn't afford included emergency supplies, vehicle winterization, and increased utility costs that would consume money she didn't have while creating additional stress during the most emotionally difficult season for someone grieving their first holiday season without their spouse. The mathematical impossibility of Elena's situation was that her monthly debt obligations totaled $5,100, while her take-home pay after garnishments averaged $2,180, creating a deficit of $2,120 monthly that was growing larger as interest and penalties accumulated on unpaid balances. The conventional financial advice that bankruptcy attorneys and credit counselors provided assumed that debt discharge would solve Elena's problems. But the reality was that losing her apartment would create rental expenses exceeding her current housing costs while eliminating the only stable address that allowed her to maintain employment at Harborview Medical Center. At this moment of complete financial collapse, with Miguel's death leaving her alone to face debt obligations that exceeded her lifetime earning potential while maintaining employment that provided barely enough income for basic survival, Elena faced an impossible choice between accepting bankruptcy that would eliminate her housing and potentially affect her nursing license, or finding some extraordinary source of income that her nursing career and conventional financial options couldn't provide through any realistic timeline that would prevent eviction and financial destruction within the next 8 days. But what Elena couldn't have known, as she prepared for her shift at Harborview Medical Center on that August morning, was that a Snohomish County tax auction notice she would discover in her mailbox that afternoon would present an opportunity that seemed guaranteed to complete her financial destruction, while actually providing the discovery that would transform her desperate circumstances into extraordinary wealth and historical significance that exceeded anything a widowed nurse from Seattle could have imagined during those dark months of grief and financial terror that had consumed her life since losing Miguel to brain cancer. The medical catastrophe that would ultimately destroy Elena and Miguel Rodriguez's carefully constructed financial life had begun on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday morning in November 2022, when Miguel mentioned during breakfast that his persistent headaches had been getting worse, despite the migraine medication his primary care physician had prescribed 3 weeks earlier. Elena, with her 18 years of nursing experience, initially attributed Miguel's symptoms to stress from his demanding position as a senior software engineer at Microsoft, where he had been working 70-hour weeks leading the development of a critical security platform that was months behind schedule and consuming every aspect of his professional attention. The progression from routine headache complaints to life-threatening medical emergency had unfolded with terrifying speed over the following 2 weeks, beginning with Miguel's increasing difficulty concentrating during complex programming tasks that had previously been effortless for someone with his advanced computer science background and 15 years of experience in cybersecurity development. The cognitive symptoms that Elena initially dismissed as workplace burnout included memory lapses during conversations, difficulty processing complex technical information that formed the foundation of his career expertise, and personality changes that manifested as unusual irritability and emotional volatility that were completely uncharacteristic for Miguel's normally calm and analytical temperament. The first emergency room visit on November 18, 2022, had occurred when Miguel experienced what Elena initially thought was a severe migraine episode, but which emergency department physicians at Swedish Medical Center quickly identified as something far more serious when Miguel's neurological examination revealed subtle but concerning signs, including pupil asymmetry, slight weakness on his left side, and cognitive processing delays that suggested intracranial pressure rather than typical headache pathology. The emergency department physician, Dr. Sarah Chen, had ordered immediate CT imaging that revealed what she described as an area of concern, requiring immediate MRI evaluation and urgent neurology consultation that would begin their descent into medical and financial catastrophe. The MRI results that Dr. Chen delivered on November 19, 2022, included the devastating diagnosis of a 4.2-centimeter mass in Miguel's right frontal lobe that imaging characteristics and location strongly suggested was a high-grade glioma, requiring immediate neurosurgical evaluation and probable emergency craniotomy for tissue diagnosis and tumor debulking. The neurosurgeon, Dr. Michael Torres, explained that Miguel's tumor was located in a region that controlled executive function and motor planning, making surgical intervention extremely challenging, while delayed treatment could result in rapid neurological deterioration and potential herniation that could be fatal within weeks if aggressive intervention wasn't immediately implemented. The insurance pre-authorization battles that began immediately after Miguel's diagnosis revealed the Byzantine complexity of modern healthcare financing, with Premier Blue Cross requiring multiple levels of approval for neurosurgical procedures, specialized imaging studies, and experimental treatments that Dr. Torres recommended as essential for someone with Miguel's specific tumor characteristics and relatively young age of 39 years. The insurance delays that Elena fought through daily phone calls and appeals processes postponed Miguel's surgery by 11 days while his tumor continued growing and his neurological symptoms progressively worsened, including the development of seizure activity that required emergency medication management and additional hospitalizations that accumulated charges faster than Elena could track or understand. The surgical procedure that was finally approved and performed on December 3, 2022, included a 7-hour craniotomy that successfully removed approximately 85% of Miguel's tumor while preserving critical brain functions. But the pathology results revealed the worst possible diagnosis: grade 4 glioblastoma multiforme, the most aggressive form of brain cancer with median survival times of 12 to 15 months, despite optimal treatment. Dr. Torres explained that Miguel's age and overall health provided better prognostic factors than typical glioblastoma patients. But the aggressive nature of his specific tumor genetics would require immediate initiation of combined chemotherapy and radiation therapy protocols that would consume the next 18 months of their lives while generating medical expenses that would exceed their combined lifetime earnings. The chemotherapy protocol that Miguel's neuro-oncologist, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, recommended included standard temozolomide therapy combined with experimental immunotherapy agents that offered the only hope for meaningful life extension beyond the typical glioblastoma survival timeline. The temozolomide treatments that formed the foundation of Miguel's therapy regimen cost $8,400 for each monthly cycle, with insurance covering approximately 68% after deductibles and co-payments, leaving Elena responsible for $2,688 monthly just for standard chemotherapy that would continue for 12 to 18 months, depending on tumor response and Miguel's tolerance for the severe side effects that accompanied brain cancer treatment. The experimental immunotherapy protocols that Dr. Walsh strongly recommended included Avastin infusions every 2 weeks at $12,000 per treatment, tumor-treating fields therapy that required specialized equipment costing $21,000 monthly, and participation in clinical trials of targeted therapy agents that weren't covered by insurance but offered Miguel's only hope for survival beyond the standard 15-month prognosis. The clinical trial participation that Miguel qualified for required extensive genetic testing, costing $800 to $900, specialized monitoring procedures that added $3,400 monthly to treatment expenses, and travel to specialized research centers in Houston and San Francisco for quarterly evaluations that consumed vacation time and generated travel expenses exceeding $2,800 per trip. The radiation therapy component of Miguel's treatment included 6 weeks of daily treatments using specialized equipment that delivered precisely targeted radiation to his tumor site, while minimizing damage to surrounding healthy brain tissue. The radiation oncology costs that accumulated during Miguel's treatment included planning procedures costing $12,000, daily treatment sessions at $890 each for 30 treatments, and specialized imaging studies every 2 weeks to monitor tumor response and adjust radiation targeting protocols. The radiation side effects that Miguel experienced included severe fatigue, cognitive impairment, and skin reactions that required additional medications and supportive care that insurance classified as comfort measures rather than essential medical treatment. The supportive care medications that became necessary during Miguel's treatment included anti-seizure drugs like Keppra at $340 monthly, steroid medications for brain swelling that cost $180 weekly, anti-nausea medications for chemotherapy side effects at $290 per prescription, and specialized nutritional supplements that his damaged digestive system required at $420 monthly when treatment side effects made normal eating impossible. The medication management that Elena coordinated while working full-time included scheduling multiple pharmacy pickups, coordinating insurance authorizations for each prescription change, and managing complex dosing schedules that required medication administration every 4 to 6 hours around the clock during Miguel's most intensive treatment periods. The home healthcare services that became essential during Miguel's treatment included skilled nursing visits 3 times weekly at $89 per visit, when Miguel's cognitive decline made self-medication dangerous. Occupational therapy at $180 per session to help maintain basic daily living skills as his tumor affected motor planning and executive function. And speech therapy at $160 per session when radiation effects impaired his communication abilities. The medical equipment that Elena rented for home use included a hospital bed costing $340 monthly, seizure monitoring equipment at $890 monthly, and bathroom safety equipment that insurance didn't cover but was essential for preventing falls. During Miguel's periods of weakness and confusion, the insurance battles that consumed Elena's non-working hours included appeals of denied claims for experimental treatments that Dr. Walsh considered essential for Miguel's survival, prior authorization requests that required detailed medical justification for each procedure and medication change, and coverage disputes over supportive care services that insurance classified as not medically necessary, despite being prescribed by Miguel's neuro-oncology team. The insurance company tactics that Elena encountered included deliberate delays in authorization approvals that postponed critical treatments, requirements for second opinions from in-network specialists who lacked Miguel's neuro-oncologist's expertise in glioblastoma treatment, and coverage limitations that forced treatment interruptions when annual or lifetime benefit caps were reached. The out-of-network complications that arose during Miguel's treatment included the reality that the most experienced glioblastoma specialists weren't included in Primera's provider network, requiring Elena to pay out-of-network costs for consultations with experts at MD Anderson Cancer Center and Johns Hopkins, who offered treatment approaches that weren't available through local providers. The out-of-network expenses that Elena managed through credit cards and personal loans included consultation fees of $200 per appointment, specialized testing that added $4,500 to each visit, and treatment modifications that required ongoing coordination between out-of-network specialists and local providers who weren't familiar with cutting-edge glioblastoma protocols. The appeals process that Elena mastered through necessity included writing detailed medical necessity letters for insurance reviewers, coordinating physician documentation that supported each treatment request, and participating in peer-to-peer review calls, where Dr. Walsh had to justify Miguel's treatment plan to insurance company physicians who lacked neuro-oncology training. The appeals timeline that governed insurance decisions typically required 30 to 60 days for complex treatment requests, during which Miguel's tumor continued progressing while critical treatments were delayed for administrative convenience rather than medical appropriateness. The pharmacy benefit complications that arose during Miguel's treatment included insurance formulary restrictions that required substitution of prescribed medications with less effective alternatives, prior authorization requirements that delayed medication starts by weeks when immediate initiation was critical for treatment effectiveness, and coverage gaps that occurred when medications were reclassified or removed from insurance formularies without adequate notice to patients or providers. The specialty pharmacy requirements that insurance imposed for expensive medications included mail order restrictions that eliminated local pharmacy relationships and created delivery delays that interrupted treatment schedules when medications weren't received on time. The medical leave complications that Miguel experienced at Microsoft included the exhaustion of his accumulated sick leave within the first month of treatment, transition to unpaid Family Medical Leave Act protection that provided job security but eliminated his salary for up to 12 weeks, and eventual transition to long-term disability benefits that provided only 60% of his previous income. While his medical expenses were increasing exponentially, the disability insurance complications that affected Miguel's income included pre-existing condition limitations, waiting periods that left them without income for 90 days, and benefit calculations that were based on reduced salary amounts. Rather than his actual earnings during the years preceding his diagnosis, the workplace accommodation requests that Miguel attempted during the periods when he felt capable of working included flexible scheduling that allowed medical appointments, work-from-home arrangements that accommodated fatigue and cognitive side effects, and reduced responsibility assignments that matched his fluctuating cognitive abilities during different phases of his treatment cycle. The accommodation limitations that Microsoft's Human Resources Department imposed included requirements for detailed medical documentation that violated Miguel's privacy preferences, productivity expectations that didn't account for treatment-related cognitive impairment, and technology access restrictions that prevented him from working effectively from home during his better days. The health insurance continuation complications that arose when Miguel's employment status changed included COBRA premium costs that increased their monthly insurance expenses from $680 to $2,200. Coverage limitations that occurred when Miguel's employer-sponsored plan was replaced with individual market insurance that provided inferior benefits, and waiting periods for pre-existing condition coverage that interrupted his treatment continuity when they were forced to change insurance providers due to cost considerations. Elena's employment complications at Harborview Medical Center included the need to use all her accumulated vacation and sick leave for Miguel's medical appointments and care needs, requests for schedule modifications that reduced her overtime opportunities and specialty pay differentials, and performance concerns that arose when emotional stress and sleep deprivation affected her clinical judgment during complex patient care situations. The Family Medical Leave Act protection that Elena utilized provided job security, but required unpaid time off that reduced their household income at precisely the time when medical expenses were consuming every available dollar, while Miguel's disability benefits provided inadequate replacement for his Microsoft salary. The financial planning consultation that Elena and Miguel pursued through their credit union revealed the inadequacy of their previous emergency planning for medical catastrophe, despite having maintained what financial advisors had considered excellent preparation, including 6 months of emergency savings, comprehensive health insurance coverage, and disability insurance that was supposed to provide income protection during extended illness. The financial advisor, Robert Kim, explained that catastrophic medical expenses typically exceeded even comprehensive insurance coverage by amounts that could consume lifetime savings within months, while creating ongoing obligations that persisted. Long after treatment concluded, the emergency fund depletion that occurred during Miguel's first 3 months of treatment included the complete exhaustion of their $47,000 savings account for medical copayments and deductibles, liquidation of their money market account containing $23,000 for uncovered treatment expenses, and borrowing against Miguel's 401k for $34,000 to cover January and February treatment costs when his disability benefits hadn't yet begun. The retirement account, borrowing that initially seemed like a temporary solution, became permanent when Miguel's condition prevented his return to work, and the loan repayment obligations continued, accumulating interest while their income was reduced and medical expenses continued mounting. The home equity borrowing that Elena and Miguel pursued in February 2023 provided $67,000 in available credit against their Bellevue home that they had purchased in 2019. But the home equity line of credit quickly became their primary source of funding for medical expenses that weren't covered by insurance or weren't eligible for medical payment plans. The home equity debt that accumulated during Miguel's treatment included monthly payment obligations that increased their housing costs from $2,400 to $3,200, while providing no long-term equity building and creating the possibility of foreclosure. If Elena couldn't maintain payments after Miguel's death, the credit card utilization that became necessary when other borrowing sources were exhausted included increasing their total credit card debt from $8,900 to $67,000 during the 18 months of Miguel's treatment, with much of the debt accumulated at promotional interest rates that would increase dramatically after introductory periods expired. The credit card management that Elena handled included balance transfers to maintain manageable interest rates, minimum payment calculations that required spreadsheet tracking, and strategic utilization of different cards for medical versus living expenses to maximize available credit while minimizing finance charges. The neurological side effects that Miguel experienced during his treatment included progressive cognitive decline that affected his ability to perform complex mental tasks, memory problems that made medication management dangerous without Elena's supervision, and personality changes that created emotional distance in their relationship during the most stressful period of their marriage. The cognitive rehabilitation that Miguel required included speech therapy at 160 per session when communication became difficult, occupational therapy to maintain basic daily living skills, and neuropsychological testing every 3 months to monitor his functional status and adjust care plans based on his changing capabilities. The physical side effects that accompanied Miguel's chemotherapy and radiation treatments included severe fatigue that made normal activities impossible, nausea and vomiting that required prescription antiemetic medications costing $180 per week, and immune system suppression that required isolation precautions and frequent monitoring for infections. The infection prevention measures that Elena implemented included isolation from friends and family during Miguel's lowest white blood cell counts, specialized cleaning protocols that required expensive antimicrobial products, and dietary restrictions that eliminated many foods while requiring organic and specially prepared meals that cost significantly more than their previous grocery budget. The seizure management that became necessary when Miguel's tumor caused epileptic activity included emergency room visits, costing $8,900 each when seizures couldn't be controlled at home, medication adjustments that required frequent blood level monitoring, and lifestyle modifications that prevented Miguel from driving and required Elena to provide transportation for all his medical appointments and basic needs. The seizure precautions that Elena implemented included bathroom modifications to prevent injury during seizures, bedroom monitoring equipment that alerted her to seizure activity during sleep, and workplace notification protocols that allowed her to the financial system failure that began within weeks of Miguel's death created a cascade of problems that transformed Elena from a grieving widow into a desperate woman facing complete financial destruction through mechanisms she couldn't control or prevent. The automatic payment failures that occurred when their joint checking account was frozen for estate processing included missed mortgage payments that immediately triggered late fees of $340, utility service disconnection warnings that threatened basic survival needs, and credit card payment delays that activated penalty interest rates exceeding 28% annually on balances that Elena was already struggling to service with her reduced single income. The credit monitoring devastation that Elena discovered 3 weeks after Miguel's death revealed that their previously excellent credit scores had plummeted from the high 700s to below 400 within a single month due to missed payments, increased credit utilization ratios when their available credit was reduced by account closures, and the automatic triggering of universal default clauses that allowed credit card companies to increase interest rates on all existing balances regardless of payment history with individual creditors. The credit score destruction had immediate practical consequences, including the cancellation of their home equity line of credit that eliminated $23,000 in available emergency funds, increase in car insurance premiums by $180 monthly due to credit-based and pricing, and disqualification from debt consolidation loans that might have provided relief from escalating payment obligations. The account closure notifications that arrived throughout August 2024 included the termination of their Chase Bank checking account due to overdraft fees exceeding $2,800 accumulated during Miguel's final hospitalization when Elena couldn't manage banking while providing end-of-life care, closure of their Wells Fargo savings account when automatic medical payments created negative balances that persisted for over 90 days, and cancellation of their Bank of America credit card that had provided their primary source of emergency funding during Miguel's treatment. The banking relationship destruction that resulted from these closures eliminated Elena's access to conventional financial services and forced her to rely on check cashing services and payday loans that charged fees consuming over 8% of her gross income while providing no opportunity to rebuild credit or establish emergency savings. The debt collection acceleration that began in late July 2024 included the transfer of Miguel's medical accounts to aggressive collection agencies that demanded immediate payment of outstanding balances totaling $127,000, threatening letters that warned of legal action and wage garnishment if payment arrangements weren't established. within 10 days, and phone harassment that began at 8 a.m. daily and continued until 9 p.m., with calls every hour demanding payment of amounts that exceeded Elena's annual salary. The collection agency tactics that Elena encountered included threats to contact her employer about her debt obligations, warnings that her nursing license could be affected by unpaid medical bills, and demands for financial disclosure that required detailed documentation of her income and expenses that collection representatives used to pressure her into payment arrangements she couldn't afford. The legal proceeding initiation that commenced in early August included service of process for collection lawsuits filed by 3 different medical creditors seeking judgments totaling $89,000. Court summons requiring Elena's appearance for debtor examinations that conflicted with her mandatory hospital work schedule, and garnishment orders that would reduce her take-home pay by additional amounts that would make basic survival mathematically impossible. The legal representation that Elena couldn't afford included consultation fees of $350 per hour for attorneys experienced in medical debt defense, court filing fees that exceeded $200 per response to collection lawsuits, and travel expenses for court appearances that required time off work during a period when Elena needed every hour of income to prevent complete financial collapse. The workplace performance deterioration that accelerated after Miguel's death included concentration problems during complex patient care procedures that required Elena to double-check medication calculations and treatment protocols she had previously performed automatically. Emotional episodes during patient interactions that reminded her of Miguel's hospitalization experiences, and memory lapses that affected her ability to recall patient information and treatment plans during shift changes and physician consultations. The nursing supervisor documentation that began in August 2024 included formal write-ups for medication errors that hadn't occurred during Elena's previous 18 years of nursing practice, counseling sessions about emotional stability requirements for trauma unit nursing, and performance improvement plans that required Elena to demonstrate clinical competency that grief and financial stress had temporarily compromised. The mandatory overtime complications that affected Elena's financial survival included her physical and emotional inability to work the additional shifts that had previously provided essential income for debt service, scheduling conflicts when court appearances and debt-related appointments interfered with hospital staffing needs, and reduced availability for holiday and weekend shifts that offered premium pay rates but required emotional and physical stamina that Elena couldn't maintain during her grief recovery period. The overtime income reduction that resulted from Elena's declining performance included the loss of approximately $400 monthly in extra wages that had been essential for covering minimum debt payments, creating additional financial pressure that worsened her stress levels and further affected her job performance in a destructive cycle that threatened her employment security. The professional license complications that emerged during Elena's crisis included continuing education requirements that cost $1,600 annually but couldn't be completed when Elena lacked funds for course registration and couldn't take time off work for mandatory training sessions. Professional liability insurance increases that added $340 annually to her expenses when her claims history was affected by performance issues and nursing board notification requirements when collection agencies threatened to report unpaid debts, to professional licensing authorities who monitored healthcare workers' financial stability. The license maintenance obligations that Elena couldn't meet included annual renewal fees, background check updates, and competency assessments that required time and money she didn't have while threatening the professional credentials that provided her only source of income. The workplace relationship deterioration that accompanied Elena's performance problems included conflicts with physician colleagues who expected reliable nursing support during critical patient care situations, tension with nursing supervisors who were required to document performance issues despite their sympathy for Elena's circumstances, and isolation from nursing peers who became concerned about Elena's emotional stability and its potential impact on patient safety in the high-acuity trauma environment. The professional network erosion that resulted from Elena's workplace problems eliminated opportunities for career advancement, reduced her access to higher-paying positions at other healthcare facilities, and damaged professional relationships that had previously provided both career support and personal friendship during difficult periods. The patient care quality concerns that hospital administration documented included delayed response to patient needs when Elena was distracted by financial stress and grief symptoms, communication problems with patients' families when Elena's emotional state affected her professional demeanor, and clinical judgment issues when exhaustion and anxiety impaired her ability to prioritize multiple patient needs during busy shifts. The patient safety implications that supervisors identified included medication administration errors that required additional monitoring and documentation, delayed recognition of patient status changes when Elena's concentration was affected by personal problems, and communication gaps with medical teams when Elena's emotional distress interfered with clear reporting and professional collaboration. The eviction proceeding timeline that accelerated throughout August 2024 included the service of formal eviction, notices that required Elena's response within 5 days, or automatic forfeiture of her tenancy rights, mandatory court appearances that conflicted with her hospital work schedule and generated additional lost wages, and legal fees that accumulated when Elena couldn't afford attorney representation and was forced to navigate complex housing court procedures while working full-time and managing overwhelming debt obligations. The housing court system that Elena encountered included expedited processing designed to favor landlords in rent collection disputes, limited tenant protections for people facing medical debt crises, and legal procedures that assumed defendant availability during normal business hours when Elena's nursing schedule required her presence at the hospital. The utility service termination that occurred during the final week of August included electricity disconnection by Seattle City Light due to $1,990 in unpaid bills that had accumulated when Elena prioritized rent payments over utility expenses, natural gas service suspension that eliminated heating and hot water capabilities as Seattle's autumn temperatures began dropping toward winter levels, and water service disconnection warnings that threatened basic sanitation and hygiene capabilities, essential for Elena's employment in the sterile hospital environment. The utility restoration requirements that Elena couldn't meet included security deposits of $800 per service, payment of outstanding balances plus reconnection fees totaling over $3,200, and same-day payment demands that required cash or certified funds that Elena couldn't access through her limited banking relationships. The housing alternative investigation that Elena pursued during her final days in the apartment revealed the impossibility of securing alternative rental housing with her damaged credit, eviction record, and debt-to-income ratio that exceeded 200% when calculated with her garnished wages and mandatory debt payments. The rental application process that Elena attempted included application fees of $150 to $250 per property, security deposit requirements ranging from $2,400 to $4,800 for apartments that would consider tenants with poor credit, and income verification standards that required gross monthly income of 3 times the rental amount. plus demonstrated financial stability that Elena couldn't provide due to her debt obligations and employment performance issues. The emergency housing assistance that Elena sought through King County Social Services included waiting lists exceeding 4 months for emergency shelter placement, eligibility requirements that excluded people with full-time employment despite inadequate income for market-rate housing, and program limitations that provided only temporary assistance without addressing the underlying debt obligations that made stable housing impossible to maintain. The social services navigation that Elena attempted while working mandatory hospital shifts included multiple appointments during business hours that conflicted with her work schedule, extensive documentation requirements that demanded financial records and employment verification, and case management meetings that required time off work Elena couldn't afford during her performance improvement period. The vehicle maintenance crisis that reached critical levels in late August included engine problems that required $3,800 in repairs Elena couldn't afford, failed emissions testing that prevented license plate renewal and made driving legally impossible, and insurance cancellation due to missed payments that created liability exposure and potential criminal charges. If Elena continued driving to work, the transportation alternatives that Elena investigated for maintaining her hospital employment included public transit options that required 2 hours each direction for her 28-mile commute, rideshare services that would cost $340 weekly for work transportation alone, and bicycle commuting that was impossible due to distance, Seattle weather conditions, and the physical demands of 12-hour nursing shifts, the vehicle registration and insurance complications that threatened Elena's ability to maintain employment included expired license plates that made her vehicle illegal to operate, liability, insurance cancellation that created financial exposure for accident damages, and vehicle inspection requirements that couldn't be completed due to mechanical problems Elena couldn't afford to repair. The legal risks that accompanied driving with expired registration and cancelled insurance included potential vehicle impoundment that would eliminate her transportation completely, criminal charges that could affect her nursing license, and financial liability for accident damages that could generate additional debt obligations exceeding her ability to pay. The commute reliability problems that developed when Elena's vehicle became increasingly unreliable included frequent breakdowns that made her late for mandatory hospital shifts, mechanical problems that required emergency repairs using payday loan advances at predatory interest rates, and transportation uncertainty that prevented Elena from accepting overtime shifts that required reliable arrival times for patient care continuity. The employment impact of transportation problems included supervisor documentation of tardiness related to vehicle problems, reduced availability for emergency shift coverage that provided premium pay rates, and the constant stress of uncertain transportation that affected Elena's job performance and professional relationships with colleagues who depended on reliable staffing for patient safety. The health insurance complications that accompanied Elena's transition from spouse coverage to individual enrollment included higher deductibles that increased from $1,800 annually to $4,500, reduced prescription coverage that required higher co-payments for medications Elena needed for managing stress-related health problems, and elimination of mental health benefits that had covered grief counseling and depression treatment during Miguel's illness and after his death. The insurance premium increases that resulted from individual coverage cost Elena an additional $680 monthly while providing inferior benefits, creating additional financial pressure during a period when her income was reduced and her health care needs were increased due to grief-related physical and mental health problems. The prescription medication access problems that developed when Elena's insurance coverage changed included higher co-payments for antidepressants that increased from $40 to $180 monthly, prior authorization requirements for anxiety medications that delayed treatment for several weeks, and formulary restrictions that required substitution of prescribed medications with alternatives that caused side effects affecting Elena's work performance. The mental health medication management that became necessary for Elena's grief recovery and stress management included coordination with physicians who weren't familiar with her medical history, trial periods with different medications that affected her cognitive function during demanding hospital shifts, and monitoring for side effects that could impact her ability to provide safe patient care in the trauma unit environment. The preventive healthcare elimination that Elena implemented to reduce expenses included cancellation of routine medical appointments for chronic condition management, postponement of recommended screening procedures that required co-payments and time off work, and elimination of dental care that was necessary for addressing stress-related grinding and clenching that had damaged her teeth during Miguel's illness. The deferred medical care that Elena couldn't afford represented health risks that could affect her ability to maintain demanding physical work in the hospital environment while creating potential future medical expenses that would worsen her financial situation during a period when any additional healthcare costs could trigger complete financial collapse. The food insecurity that developed during Elena's financial collapse included reliance on hospital cafeteria meals during work, shifts when food purchases were impossible due to transportation and financial limitations, utilization of food pantries that served healthcare workers but couldn't provide adequate nutrition for someone working 60-hour weeks in physically demanding hospital conditions, and meal elimination when Elena was forced to choose between food purchases and minimum debt payments required to prevent additional collection agency harassment. The nutritional deficiency that resulted from inadequate food access included weight loss that affected Elena's physical stamina during long hospital shifts, cognitive function impacts when irregular eating affected her blood sugar levels and concentration abilities, and immune system compromise that increased her susceptibility to infections transmitted by patients in the hospital environment. The meal planning impossibility that characterized Elena's situation included lack of reliable transportation for grocery shopping, absence of cooking facilities when utility services were disconnected, and financial inability to purchase adequate food when every available dollar was required for debt service and basic survival expenses. The food preparation limitations that resulted from Elena's housing crisis included lack of refrigeration when electricity was disconnected, absence of cooking equipment when gas service was terminated, and time constraints when Elena's work schedule and debt management activities consumed every available hour for meal planning and preparation. The workplace nutrition support that Elena relied on included discounted hospital cafeteria meals that provided her primary daily nutrition, vending machine food purchases using hospital employee discounts, and occasional meals provided by nursing colleagues who were concerned about Elena's obvious weight loss and declining physical condition. The nutrition program access that Elena investigated included hospital employee assistance programs that provided emergency food vouchers, community programs serving healthcare workers facing financial crises, and religious organization meal services that required transportation and time commitments Elena couldn't manage while working mandatory overtime shifts. The family relationship deterioration that accelerated after Miguel's death included conflicts with Elena's sister Carmen about financial management decisions, tension with her brother Roberto about Elena's refusal to accept family financial assistance that would strain their own limited resources, and communication breakdown with extended family members who couldn't understand the complexity of Elena's medical debt obligations and legal limitations on debt resolution. The family support erosion that resulted from these conflicts eliminated Elena's primary source of emotional assistance during her grief recovery, while creating additional stress about damaged relationships with people who had previously provided stability and encouragement during difficult periods. The friendship network collapse that occurred during Elena's crisis included the withdrawal of couple friends who couldn't maintain relationships after Miguel's death, changed the social dynamic, isolation from nursing colleagues who became concerned about Elena's emotional stability and its potential impact on their professional environment, and loss of church community connections when Elena couldn't participate in activities that required financial contributions or time commitments beyond her survival obligations. The social support elimination that resulted from these relationship losses left Elena without the emotional assistance and practical help that had previously provided resilience during challenging periods of her life. The professional network erosion that accompanied Elena's workplace problems included damaged relationships with physician colleagues who questioned her clinical competence during her performance difficulties, tension with nursing supervisors who were required to document her problems despite personal sympathy for her circumstances, and isolation from professional organizations when membership fees and continuing education requirements became financially impossible to maintain. The career advancement opportunities that Elena lost due to her professional network deterioration included elimination from consideration for specialty positions that required stable personal circumstances, reduced access to higher-paying opportunities at other healthcare facilities, and loss of mentorship relationships that had previously supported her professional development and career progression. The court proceeding complications that multiplied throughout Elena's crisis included simultaneous involvement in eviction proceedings, medical debt collection lawsuits, garnishment hearings, and bankruptcy consultation meetings that required legal representation Elena couldn't afford, and court appearances that conflicted with her mandatory work schedule. The legal system navigation that Elena attempted without attorney representation included self-preparation of legal documents using public library computers when her internet service was disconnected, research of legal procedures during brief breaks between hospital shifts and court appearances, where her lack of legal knowledge placed her at severe disadvantage against experienced collection attorneys. Representing medical creditors, the garnishment order complications that affected Elena's income included wage attachment that reduced her take-home pay by 25%, bank account freezing that eliminated her access to emergency funds, and asset seizure threats that included potential loss of her vehicle that was essential for maintaining employment. The garnishment procedures that Elena couldn't prevent included automatic deduction from her paychecks that occurred before she received her wages, monitoring of her bank accounts by collection agencies that detected and seized any available funds, and legal requirements for financial disclosure that revealed her complete inability to satisfy debt obligations while maintaining basic survival needs. The bankruptcy consultation complications that Elena pursued revealed the inadequacy of conventional debt relief for her specific circumstances, including Chapter 7 limitations that would require liquidation of essential assets, while failing to address ongoing income insufficiency. Chapter 13. Payment plan requirements that exceeded her available income after basic survival expenses, and legal fees for bankruptcy filing that Elena couldn't afford, while facing immediate eviction and utility disconnection. The bankruptcy timeline that attorneys explained would require several months for completion, while providing no immediate relief from eviction proceedings, utility disconnection, or wage garnishment that threatened Elena's ability to maintain employment and housing during the legal process. The mathematical calculation that Elena completed during her final week in the apartment revealed the complete impossibility of conventional debt resolution providing any pathway to stability, with her monthly obligations totaling $5,100, while her garnished income provided only $2,980 monthly, creating a deficit that grew larger each month, regardless of her efforts to increase working hours or reduce survival expenses. The debt service impossibility that Elena faced included medical collection demands that exceeded her gross annual income, mortgage-like payments for medical equipment that was no longer needed after Miguel's death, and legal fees that accumulated faster than she could address them through conventional payment arrangements offered by creditors. The employment sustainability analysis that Elena conducted revealed that her declining job performance would likely result in termination within 60 days, eliminating her only source of income and health insurance, while leaving her responsible for debt obligations that would persist regardless of her employment status. The career recovery impossibility that Elena recognized included the permanent damage to her professional reputation from performance problems documented during her grief and financial crisis, elimination of references from supervisors who had been required to document her clinical competency issues, and loss of specialized skills that required consistent practice and continuing education she couldn't afford to maintain. The conventional solution failure analysis that Elena completed showed that bankruptcy would eliminate her housing, while failing to address the income insufficiency that made debt payment impossible. Debt consolidation was unavailable due to her damaged credit and excessive debt-to-income ratio, and family assistance would be inadequate for addressing debt obligations that exceeded $400,000 while potentially damaging relatives' financial stability without solving Elena's underlying problems. The professional advice consensus that Elena had received from bankruptcy attorneys, credit counselors, and social workers uniformly recommended accepting homelessness as a transitional step toward eventual stability, but provided no realistic timeline for recovery or practical plan for maintaining employment while homeless in Seattle's expensive and competitive healthcare market. The certified mail discovery that occurred on August 30th, 2024, included a tax auction notice from Snohomish County advertising the sale of a two-bedroom cabin on 4.7 acres of forested land in the Cascade Mountains, with unpaid property taxes totaling $23,400 and a minimum bid requirement of $35,000 to cover accumulated penalties and administrative costs. The property description that accompanied the auction notice painted a grim picture of an abandoned structure that had been vacant for over 8 years, containing no electricity or running water, significant structural damage from weather exposure, and access only by a deteriorating gravel road that became impassable during winter weather conditions. The property investigation that Elena conducted during her final day off work revealed an isolated cabin surrounded by dense forest, approximately 45 miles northeast of Seattle in mountainous terrain that provided complete privacy but also presented significant challenges for habitation by someone accustomed to urban conveniences and professional employment requiring reliable transportation. The cabin structure that Elena examined during her site visit included a deteriorating two-bedroom building with a leaking metal roof, broken windows that had been covered with plywood, and interior damage from years of water intrusion and animal habitation that would require extensive repairs before the structure could provide safe shelter. The financial analysis that Elena completed regarding the cabin purchase revealed that, The property acquisition would consume her remaining emergency funds, while creating additional obligations for repairs, utilities installation, and property maintenance that she couldn't afford with her reduced income and existing debt obligations. The expert consultations that Elena arranged included a building inspector who estimated repair costs of $45,000 to $67,000 for basic habitability, a contractor who warned about structural problems that could make renovation economically impossible, and a real estate agent who described the property as unsuitable for anyone seeking reasonable access to employment opportunities in the Seattle metropolitan area. The family opposition that Elena encountered when discussing the cabin idea included emotional appeals from her sister Carmen about the isolation and impracticality of rural living during Elena's grief recovery, practical concerns from her brother Roberto about the safety risks of living alone in a remote location without reliable communication or emergency services, and unanimous agreement from relatives that purchasing the cabin would accelerate rather than prevent Elena's financial collapse while creating additional safety risks during her emotional vulnerability period. The decision matrix that Elena created during her final night in the apartment included comparison of certain homelessness through conventional approaches against probable failure through cabin purchase, with the determining factor being that conventional debt resolution guaranteed immediate housing loss, while cabin ownership provided at least theoretical shelter during her financial recovery period. The risk assessment that Elena completed showed that cabin purchase would consume her final resources, while potentially providing housing security that conventional rental arrangements couldn't offer given her damaged credit, eviction record, and insufficient income for market-rate apartments in the Seattle area. The auction participation that Elena committed to on September 3, 2024, required liquidating her remaining assets, including jewelry, electronics, and household goods, through emergency sales that provided $28,000 in cash, borrowing $7,000 against her final credit card limit, and accepting that successful cabin acquisition would leave her with approximately $400 for emergency expenses while facing immediate obligations for property taxes, basic repairs, and transportation costs for commuting to her hospital employment from the remote mountain location. The bidding strategy that Elena developed recognized her financial limitations would prevent competition with experienced real estate investors, but hoped that the property's obvious problems and remote location would limit bidder interest and allow acquisition at the minimum bid amount. The auction day preparation that Elena completed included arranging time off work that she couldn't afford, obtaining certified funds through her final available credit, and accepting that the auction outcome would determine whether she faced immediate homelessness or temporary shelter in an isolated cabin that might provide time to address her impossible debt situation. The successful cabin acquisition that occurred on September 3, 2024, for the minimum bid of $35,000 left Elena as the owner of a deteriorating structure on 4.7 acres of Cascade Mountain forest, with immediate obligations for property tax payments, structural repairs, and basic utilities installation that exceeded her financial capacity while providing shelter that was theoretically habitable despite obvious problems with heating, plumbing, and weather protection. The immediate post-auction complications included legal requirements for tax payment within 30 days, insurance obligations for property coverage that exceeded $200 monthly, and practical necessities for basic repairs that would allow occupancy during Washington's approaching winter season. The cabin inspection that Elena conducted during her first overnight stay revealed structural problems that were worse than initially apparent, including foundation damage that created dangerous floor instability, electrical systems that posed fire hazards due to decades of moisture exposure, and plumbing failures that left the cabin without functional water or sewage systems. The habitability assessment that Elena completed showed that the cabin required immediate attention to basic systems before occupancy would be safe. But her remaining funds of $400 were completely inadequate for even emergency repairs that would prevent further deterioration during autumn weather. The floor exploration that Elena began while cleaning debris from the main room revealed an unusual metal plate beneath damaged floorboards near the cabin's stone fireplace, partially concealed by years of accumulated dirt and animal nesting materials. The metal plate investigation that Elena pursued using a pry bar found among the cabin's abandoned tools revealed a locked access panel that appeared to lead to an underground space that wasn't visible from the cabin's exterior foundation inspection. The underground chamber discovery that Elena made after removing the access panel revealed a carefully constructed underground room, approximately 12 feet by 16 feet, accessed by a sturdy wooden ladder and containing climate-controlled storage systems that had remained operational despite the cabin's abandonment. The chamber investigation that Elena conducted using her cell phone flashlight revealed metal storage cabinets lining the walls, sophisticated ventilation equipment that appeared to have been professionally installed, and electrical systems that were separate from the cabin's deteriorating infrastructure. The document discovery that occurred when Elena opened the storage cabinets revealed hundreds of classified files bearing CIA letterhead and classification markings, organized in filing systems that included documents from Operation Mockingbird, foreign intelligence assessments from the 1980s, and correspondence between intelligence officials that had been missing from government archives since 1987. The file examination that Elena conducted revealed detailed information about domestic surveillance programs, foreign agent recruitment protocols, and intelligence sharing arrangements that had been classified at the highest levels of government secrecy. The authentication research that Elena conducted using her smartphone revealed that the documents appeared to match descriptions of classified materials that had been reported missing from CIA facilities during the 1980s, with several files containing information about intelligence operations that had been the subject of congressional investigations and Freedom of Information Act requests that had been denied due to national security concerns. The document's significance that became apparent during Elena's initial review suggested that the materials represented evidence of intelligence activities that had been concealed from congressional oversight and public scrutiny for over 3 decades. The whistleblower protection research that Elena pursued revealed federal laws that provided financial rewards for individuals who disclosed evidence of government misconduct, with potential compensation ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars, depending on the significance of the disclosed information and its value for congressional oversight and law enforcement investigations. The legal consultation that Elena arranged through secure communication channels confirmed that the documents appeared to meet criteria for whistleblower protection and compensation under federal statutes designed to encourage disclosure of government misconduct and intelligence community violations. The government contact that Elena initiated through congressional intelligence oversight committees resulted in immediate federal investigation of the documents, verification of their authenticity through classified databases, and recognition that Elena's discovery represented the most significant intelligence document recovery in decades. The compensation determination that federal investigators provided included a preliminary assessment that Elena's disclosure qualified for the maximum whistleblower reward of $8.4 million, plus ongoing consulting payments for her assistance with congressional hearings and intelligence community reforms based on the disclosed information. The life transformation that resulted from Elena's desperate cabin purchase included elimination of her medical debt through federal compensation, provision of housing security through government relocation assistance, and career transition to intelligence oversight consulting that provided income exceeding her nursing salary, while utilizing her analytical skills and attention to detail that had made her an excellent trauma nurse. The financial security that Elena achieved through her accidental discovery had vindicated her seemingly irrational decision to risk everything on a deteriorating mountain cabin, transforming her from a desperate widow facing homelessness into a government consultant whose discovery had exposed decades of hidden intelligence activities and provided her with the resources to rebuild her life with dignity and purpose. Elena Rodriguez's journey from financial devastation to extraordinary discovery proved that sometimes the most desperate choices, which appear to guarantee failure according to conventional wisdom, can lead to outcomes that no amount of careful planning could have achieved, vindicating the courage required to risk everything when conventional solutions offer no hope for survival or recovery. The initial verification process that Elena undertook after discovering the classified documents required extraordinary caution due to the potentially dangerous implications of possessing stolen government materials, beginning with secure digital photography of sample documents using encrypted communication methods she researched through cybersecurity forums that Miguel had frequented during his Microsoft employment. The authentication research that Elena conducted during her first week of cabin occupancy revealed that the documents contained classification markings, agency letterhead, and formatting consistent with CIA materials from the 1980s, but verifying their authenticity would require contact with government officials who might treat Elena as a criminal rather than a whistleblower, depending on how she approached the disclosure process. The legal consultation that Elena arranged through encrypted communication channels led her to attorney David Chen from the Government Accountability Project, a non-profit organization specializing in whistleblower protection, who confirmed that Elena's discovery potentially qualified for federal protection under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act if the documents revealed government misconduct or illegal activities. Chen's initial assessment of the documents through secure transmission revealed that they appeared to contain evidence of domestic surveillance programs that had operated without congressional oversight, foreign intelligence operations that had violated international law, and interagency communications that had been concealed from legislative investigators during multiple congressional hearings about CIA activities during the 1980s. The document organization project that Elena undertook during her first month in the cabin revealed the systematic nature of the hidden archive, with files organized by operation names, including materials from Operation Mockingbird that detailed domestic media manipulation programs, Operation Chaos documents showing illegal surveillance of American citizens, and correspondence about assassination programs that had been denied during congressional testimony. The file categorization that Elena completed using her nursing attention to detail and systematic approach revealed over 847 individual documents spanning from 1979 to 1987, including memoranda between CIA directors and senior officials, operational reports from field agents, and budget documents showing funding for activities that had been explicitly prohibited by congressional oversight committees. The historical significance assessment that Elena conducted through consultation with Dr. Patricia Williams, a former intelligence analyst turned academic whistleblower advocate, revealed that many of the documents contained information that had been sought by congressional investigators, journalists, and historians for over 3 decades without success. Dr. Williams' analysis confirmed that Elena's discovery represented the most significant intelligence document recovery since the Pentagon Papers, with potential implications for understanding covert operations that had shaped American foreign policy and domestic security programs without public knowledge or democratic oversight. The technical authentication process that federal investigators initiated after Elena's formal disclosure included forensic analysis of paper composition, ink dating, and printing methods that confirmed the document's age and authenticity, digital analysis of classification markings that match CIA formatting standards from the appropriate time period, and cross-reference verification with existing declassified materials that corroborated the authenticity of operational details and personnel. Names mentioned in the discovered files. The forensic analysis conducted by the FBI Document Authentication Laboratory confirmed that the materials had been produced using government printing equipment and classified document procedures consistent with CIA standards from the 1980s. Eliminating any possibility that the documents were modern forgeries or fabricated materials. The government response that Elena's disclosure triggered included immediate involvement of the FBI Counterintelligence Division, Congressional Intelligence Oversight Committees, and the CIA Inspector General's Office, creating a federal investigation that expanded rapidly as the significance of the discovered documents became apparent to officials who had been seeking this information for decades. The investigative coordination that developed around Elena's disclosure included protection detail assignment due to the sensitive nature of the materials, secure communication protocols for ongoing document review, and legislative briefings for congressional leadership about the implications of the discovered evidence for historical understanding of intelligence community activities. The congressional hearing process that Elena's disclosure initiated included closed-door testimony before the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Senate Intelligence Committee briefings about the operational details revealed in the documents, and coordination with the Church Committee follow-up investigations that had been seeking evidence of the activities documented in Elena's discovery. The legislative impact assessment that congressional staff completed revealed that Elena's documents provided evidence of intelligence community violations that had been suspected but never proven, including domestic surveillance programs that had operated without legal authorization and foreign operations that had violated international treaties and domestic law. The media attention management that became necessary as news of Elena's discovery began circulating included coordination with investigative journalists who had been researching intelligence community activities for decades, protection protocols to prevent disclosure of Elena's identity until her safety could be guaranteed, and public information campaigns to explain the significance of the discovered materials for historical understanding of American intelligence operations. The publicity coordination that Elena's legal team managed included selective disclosure to established investigative reporters with expertise in intelligence community oversight, background briefings for congressional staff who would be responsible for legislative responses to the discovered evidence, and academic consultations with historians who could provide context for the revealed operations. The international implications assessment that State Department officials conducted revealed that Elena's documents contained evidence of foreign operations that could affect current diplomatic relationships, intelligence sharing agreements that had been concealed from allied governments, and operational activities that had violated international law during periods when such violations had been explicitly denied by American officials. The diplomatic impact management that became necessary included confidential briefings for allied intelligence services who had been affected by the revealed operations, coordination with international human rights organizations who had been investigating suspected American intelligence activities, and legal consultations about potential international court proceedings related to the revealed evidence. The whistleblower reward calculation that federal officials conducted under the Intelligence Community Whistleblower Protection Act included assessment of the significance of Elena's disclosure for congressional oversight, law enforcement investigations, and public understanding of government activities that had been concealed for over 3 decades. The compensation determination process that the Office of Inspector General coordinated included review of precedent awards for similar disclosures, assessment of the personal risk that Elena had undertaken by preserving and disclosing the materials, and recognition of the extraordinary public service that her discovery represented for democratic oversight of intelligence activities. The initial reward announcement that Elena received included notification of a preliminary award of $8.4 million under federal whistleblower protection statutes, representing the maximum compensation available for disclosures of government misconduct that provide substantial assistance to congressional oversight and law enforcement investigations. The compensation structure that federal officials established included immediate payment of $2.1 million for Elena's initial disclosure and cooperation with the investigation, quarterly payments totaling $4.2 million over 2 years for her ongoing assistance with congressional hearings and legal proceedings, and a final payment of $2.1 million upon completion of the investigation and implementation of intelligence community reforms based on her disclosed evidence. The tax consultation that Elena's legal team arranged revealed that whistleblower compensation under federal protection statutes received favorable tax treatment, with portions of her award qualifying for reduced tax rates due to the public service nature of her disclosure and the personal sacrifice involved in preserving materials that could have resulted in criminal prosecution if handled improperly. The financial planning consultation that Elena pursued through her attorney's recommendations included establishment of trust accounts to protect her compensation from potential legal challenges, investment strategies to provide long-term security after her traumatic financial experience with Miguel's medical debt, and charitable giving planning to support organizations that had assisted her during her crisis period. The debt elimination process that Elena's compensation enabled included immediate payment of all outstanding medical collection accounts, totaling $394,000, resolution of legal proceedings that had threatened wage garnishment and asset seizure, and establishment of credit repair services to address the damage that had resulted from her financial crisis following Miguel's death. The financial restoration that Elena achieved through her whistleblower compensation included elimination of all debt obligations within 60 days of her initial award payment, establishment of emergency savings accounts that would prevent future financial vulnerability, and investment of compensation funds to provide permanent income security that would allow Elena to pursue meaningful work rather than survival employment. The consulting contract opportunities that emerged from Elena's disclosure included offers from congressional intelligence oversight committees who valued her analytical skills and attention to detail, academic institutions who sought her assistance with historical research about intelligence community activities, and government reform organizations who wanted her insight about improving whistleblower protection and encouraging disclosure of government misconduct. The professional transition planning that Elena undertook with career counselors specializing in government consulting revealed that her nursing background had provided analytical skills, attention to detail, and ethical framework that were highly valued in intelligence oversight and government accountability work. The congressional consulting assignment that Elena accepted included ongoing work with the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence to analyze the historical significance of her discovered documents, assistance with legislative reforms to prevent future intelligence community violations, and public testimony about the importance of whistleblower protection for democratic oversight of government activities. The consulting compensation that Elena negotiated included annual retainer fees of $240,000 for her availability for congressional hearings and document analysis, project-based compensation for specific research assignments, and travel reimbursement for testimony and consultation activities that occurred throughout the country. The academic collaboration opportunities that developed from Elena's disclosure included research partnerships with universities studying intelligence community history, consultation with historians writing about covert operations during the Cold War period, and speaking engagements at academic conferences about the importance of document preservation and whistleblower disclosure. For historical understanding, the academic consulting work that Elena pursued provided intellectual stimulation and professional satisfaction that had been missing from her nursing career, while utilizing her systematic approach and analytical skills in ways that contributed to public education and democratic accountability. The media consultation work that Elena undertook included background assistance for investigative journalists writing about intelligence community activities, fact-checking for documentary productions about covert operations, and expert commentary for news programs discussing the implications of her discovery for understanding American intelligence history. The media work compensation that Elena received included consulting fees for television appearances, research assistance payments for journalistic investigations, and speaking fees for documentary participation that provided additional income, while expanding public awareness of the significance of her discovery. The housing transition that Elena's financial security enabled included renovation of the mountain cabin that had provided her initial shelter into a comfortable permanent residence that honored her connection to Miguel's memory while providing the privacy and security she needed after her traumatic experience with financial crisis and public attention from her disclosure. The cabin renovation project that Elena undertook included installation of reliable electrical and plumbing systems, insulation and weatherproofing improvements that made year-round occupancy comfortable, and technology infrastructure that allowed her to work remotely on consulting projects while maintaining her preferred mountain lifestyle. The grief recovery process that Elena pursued with her improved financial security included continued therapy with specialists in widow bereavement, who helped her process the trauma of Miguel's death and the subsequent financial crisis, support group participation with other widows who had faced medical debt catastrophes, and memorial activities that honored Miguel's memory while celebrating Elena's survival and transformation. The emotional healing that Elena achieved included recognition that her survival and success honored Miguel's sacrifice during his illness, acceptance that her financial recovery vindicated the risks they had taken for his medical treatment, and peace about her decision to preserve their shared values of service and integrity through her whistleblower disclosure. The relationship rebuilding that Elena undertook included reconciliation with family members who had opposed her cabin purchase, but now recognized her judgment had been correct, reconnection with nursing colleagues who admired her courage and transformation, and new friendships with other whistleblowers and government accountability advocates who understood her unique experience. The social network reconstruction that Elena achieved provided emotional support and professional relationships that honored her past nursing career while supporting her new work in government oversight and historical preservation. The health restoration that Elena prioritized with her financial security included comprehensive medical care to address stress-related health problems that had developed during her financial crisis, nutrition counseling to recover from the food insecurity she had experienced, and fitness activities that rebuilt her physical strength and stamina after the exhaustion of working excessive hours while managing overwhelming debt. The healthcare access that Elena now enjoyed included preventive care that had been impossible during her financial crisis, mental health treatment that supported her continued grief recovery and professional transition, and alternative therapies that address the long-term effects of chronic stress and trauma. The intelligence community reform impact that Elena's disclosure generated included congressional legislation to strengthen whistleblower protection for intelligence personnel, increased oversight requirements for covert operations, and historical review processes to identify and declassify documents that had been improperly concealed from democratic oversight. The legislative changes that resulted from Elena's disclosure included the Intelligence Community Accountability Act that established new protections for whistleblowers and requirements for congressional notification of sensitive operations. Reforms that dozens of legislators credited directly to the evidence that Elena had preserved and disclosed. The historical preservation project that Elena initiated included establishment of a non-profit foundation to support document preservation and whistleblower advocacy, funding for academic research into intelligence community history, and educational programs to teach young people about the importance of government accountability and democratic oversight. The foundation work that Elena developed provided a meaningful way to utilize her compensation for public benefit while creating lasting impact that extended beyond her individual disclosure to support systematic improvements in government transparency and accountability. The whistleblower advocacy work that Elena pursued included mentoring other potential whistleblowers who were considering disclosure of government misconduct, lobbying for legislative improvements to whistleblower protection, and public speaking about the personal costs and public benefits of disclosure decisions. The advocacy work that Elena undertook provided meaning and purpose that connected her personal experience with broader efforts to strengthen democratic institutions and encourage government accountability through citizen oversight and disclosure. The educational outreach programs that Elena developed included speaking engagements at nursing schools about the ethical obligations of healthcare professionals who encounter government misconduct, presentations at law schools about whistleblower protection and government accountability, and workshops for government employees about their rights and responsibilities when they discover evidence of misconduct. The educational work that Elena pursued honored her background in healthcare while applying her new expertise in government oversight to train future professionals about their ethical obligations and legal protections. The life perspective transformation that Elena experienced through her journey from financial devastation to national significance included recognition that her survival had required courage that she didn't know she possessed, acknowledgement that her success had resulted from maintaining her ethical principles during impossible circumstances, and understanding that her discovery had provided meaning and purpose that transcended her personal financial recovery. The philosophical growth that Elena achieved included appreciation for the interconnection between personal integrity and social responsibility, recognition that individual courage could create historical change, and confidence that surviving extreme adversity had prepared her for whatever challenges her new life might present. The marriage legacy preservation that Elena achieved through her disclosure included honoring Miguel's values of service and integrity that had guided their shared life, recognition that their sacrifice during his medical treatment had preserved their ethical principles despite devastating financial consequences, and understanding that her survival and success represented fulfillment of their shared commitment to making meaningful contributions to society. The memorial significance that Elena's achievement represented included proof that their love and partnership had created strength that survived Miguel's death and enabled Elena to serve the public good in ways that honored their shared values. The nursing profession honor that Elena's transformation represented included demonstration that healthcare workers' analytical skills and ethical training prepared them for important roles in government accountability and social justice. Recognition that nursing values of advocacy and protection extended beyond individual patient care to broader social responsibility, and proof that healthcare professionals could apply their skills to address systemic problems that affected public welfare. The professional legacy that Elena created honored her 18 years of nursing service while demonstrating that healthcare training provided foundation for broader social contribution and civic engagement. The community impact reflection that Elena pursued included recognition that her individual courage had created benefits for democratic institutions and historical understanding that extended far beyond her personal circumstances. Acknowledgement that her survival and success provided hope for other people facing impossible financial and personal circumstances, an understanding that her story demonstrated the potential for extraordinary outcomes when people maintained ethical principles during extreme adversity. The social contribution that Elena achieved provided meaning that transformed her personal tragedy into public service and historical significance. The long-term impact planning that Elena developed included expansion of her non-profit foundation to support whistleblower advocacy and document preservation internationally, collaboration with academic institutions to establish research programs about intelligence community history and government accountability, and mentorship programs for healthcare professionals who encountered ethical dilemmas in their work. The future work that Elena envisioned would utilize her unique experience and expertise to create lasting improvements in government transparency and democratic oversight that honored her personal journey while serving broader public interests. The financial security utilization that Elena planned included continued simple living that honored her experience of financial vulnerability, charitable giving that supported organizations serving people facing medical debt and financial crisis, and investment strategies that provided long-term security while generating resources for her advocacy and educational work. The wealth management approach that Elena adopted reflected her understanding that financial security was a tool for service rather than an end in itself, maintaining her connection to the values that had sustained her during her most difficult period. The relationship continuation plans that Elena developed included ongoing connection with other whistleblowers and government accountability advocates who shared her commitment to democratic oversight, maintenance of friendships with nursing colleagues who had supported her during her crisis, and family relationship rebuilding that honored her success while acknowledging the concern and love that had motivated their opposition to her cabin purchase. The social network that Elena cultivated provided both emotional support and professional collaboration that sustained her work while honoring her past relationships and experiences. The personal growth continuation that Elena committed to included ongoing grief recovery work that honored Miguel's memory while embracing her new life and opportunities, continued education about intelligence community history and government accountability that enhanced her consulting effectiveness, and spiritual development that provided meaning and purpose beyond her professional achievements. The personal development that Elena pursued maintained her connection to the values and relationships that had sustained her while embracing the growth and opportunities that her transformation had created. Elena Rodriguez's extraordinary journey, from a desperate widow facing homelessness to a nationally significant whistleblower and government accountability, advocate proved that maintaining ethical principles during impossible circumstances could create outcomes that exceeded any reasonable expectation, vindicating the courage required to choose principle over apparent prudence when conventional wisdom offered no hope for survival or success. Her transformation demonstrated that individual integrity and social responsibility were inseparable, that personal courage could create historical change, and that surviving extreme adversity could prepare people for extraordinary service that honored both personal values and public welfare. The mountain cabin that had seemed like Elena's final desperate mistake had become the foundation for a new life of meaning, security, and service that honored Miguel's memory while creating lasting impact for democratic institutions and government accountability. Elena's story proved that sometimes the most desperate choices, which appear guaranteed to fail, according to conventional analysis, can lead to outcomes that vindicate faith in principles over pragmatism and demonstrate that individual courage can create change that extends far beyond personal circumstances to serve the broader public good. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.